So once again, welcome to today's class. As indicated earlier, today the main idea is to finish anything related to HTML. You have to finish anything related to HTML. I wanted us to do a little bit of CSS, but I think we have a lot of things to cover today. So probably the CSS, like the deep dive into CSS, we'll have to wait next week. Then we do a little bit of Bootstrap. After you've learned CSS the hard way, you learn a framework that makes CSS very easy because that framework has a lot of styling. Like they've done a lot of this CSS for you, so you just call the classes in your code, and that's it. It makes your work very nice. So, but before we go to that, we have to learn how CSS works, so that you appreciate how uh, Bootstrap works. Then from there, we will do a little bit of template. I'll give you template, you edit it and add your stuff. Where I'll let you change a few things. So there are exciting times ahead. But today we are finishing anything HTML. From today, we won't, although we'll be doing HTML, but I will take it that you guys understand HTML, whatever HTML is. So there are a few things I want us to learn today before you go to forms. That is, we are going to look at lists. That's ordered list and unordered list. Then you look at block and inline elements, look at classes and IDs. Then you look at layouts, how you to structure your web pages. Then also we take a look at semantics. HTML5 has some semantics like div, like session, like footer. That makes you laying out your HTML page fun, kind of fun. So we are going to do all those things to get you started. So let's just dive in what you have for today. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
good evening, class.
yeah, good evening.
Yeah, hope everyone is fine this evening.
Yes, so
I
you're
don't know,
fine.
but then attendance today is very low. I don't know if it's because of the occasion or something. I just can't tell.
Oh, okay. It occurred to me, yes. Uh,
Uh,
it- it's true.
you know,
Attendance.
yeah, it's very low. So let me try and see if I can get the attention on the WhatsApp page and see what we can do.
Okay,
Because I think it's only one
okay. So
person. I don't know if I'm correct. Yeah. So
yes, it's
let
only
me send them
somebody.
a message. Yeah. So let them we can hold on
Okay,
from now and then yeah, let me do that.
okay, that's fine. That's
All right.
Let me stop recording. Then when they come out, start. Okay. So these are just like P-tag. They are block element. They force a new line when they are inserted. These are example of block element address. We've encountered this before. That's last week. Block codes, A side. These ones we learn about them later when you start doing semantics. Now, other things also, uh, other block elements are form, which we also learn later on. The UL, the unordered list, and the ordered list. So these are forms of block elements. The only inline element that are known as span, anchor tag, then images. All these ones are all these elements are example of inline elements. So if you want to put elements side by side, you know which one to use. If you want to do side by side, then you have to use an inline element. If you want to use if you want the element to fill the whole the whole space, then you have to use block element. But all these ones, you can use CSS to change their properties. Now, there's this important concept in HTML called classes. So what are classes? So classes are attributes that is used to specify a class for an element. So what it is you can have an element with a particular class. So you can have two or more elements with the same class. Then you can use CSS to manipulate the attribute, the look and feel of this element. So let's take an example from here. Let me copy this code, then run it for ourselves. Copy and paste. Okay. So classes.html. Now look at this style sheet. So you already know style, this internal styling, and there's a class. So look at how you declare classes in HTML. Use the dot operator, then the name of the class that you want to define. Okay, dot, then the name of the class. But when you're going to use it inside your HTML, just do class, then you specify the name without the dot. So as you can see, two or more elements can have the same class. Okay, now let me save it and run the classes so that you have a feeling of how classes behave. Boom. So this class over here, this class CSS that we specified, that the background should be tomato, the text, the color, so that the text color should be white, the border should be black, as you can see, the margin should be 20. So the space between this element and this one is 20. As you can see, there's a little bit of space between the top and the bottom element. Then the padding is be 20. So the difference between margin and padding is, if you talk about padding takes, that's the space within the container. So from landing to this container, from here to here, that's the padding. Okay. Then margin works outside the container. So the margin is from this to this place. That's it. So you let me alter it so that you have a feeling of how. So now when I disable the padding, run the element, as you can see, the space that was around this element and the container has been removed. So padding, when you talk about padding, that is within the container, the space between elements within the container. But margin is outside the container. So let me bring back the padding. As you can see, there's a space. Now let me take off the margin. And as you can see, the space between the containers have been taken off. So that's the difference between margin. So please take note of that. Now, what we are talking about are classes. So to define a class, you just use the dot, the name of the class. Okay, then write all your CSS, your styling that you want to do. Now, when you finish, you can apply this class to any element on that page. So with class, you can apply to any number of elements, and each one of these elements will have the class or the styling that has been declared up. Now, what you can also have a lot of classes, elements having a lot of classes. A CSS have, like, can define a lot of class in a CSS, then apply it to elements. So for example, I can have another CSS called main. Now, what you want to do is, if the CSS, the class main is applied to element, let's say we want the color to be, let's go to black. Okay, so now look what happened. I'm applying to the second one, main. And as you can see, the styling has been applied to the second one. So you can have multiple classes being applied to the same elements. What you do is you enter the name of the first class, then you bring a space, then apply the second one. So these are classes. So classes can be applied to multiple number of elements. Now the broader of classes is what we call IDs. Now IDs can be applied to only one element. Okay, then so IDs attribute is used to specify a unique ID for an HTML element. So with that one, you only apply it to only one element. You cannot have one or you cannot have more than one element with the same ID in an HTML document. Okay, so the ID has to be unique. Now let's copy this one, then I'll explain this one further. So let's call it ID.html, then paste it. Now, just like before, IDs also are being indicated with the hash sign. Okay, if you use a hash sign, that means that we are talking about a particular ID. Then in HTML, you just do ID is equal to, then you put in the name of the ID that you declared without the hash. Without the hash. So let's save it. Then go to ID HTML. So that is it. This is our ID. So header, the background is light blue, the text is black, padding is 40, and the text align. So text align. So that is how you align text. If you want to put it in center, you just do text align center. To put it to center the element for you. So this is how IDs work. IDs use pound sign or hash, and it can be applied to only one element within your HTML document. Okay, so just a quick question. What do you use to specify class in CSS? Anyone? If you want to write a class in CSS, what do you use to indicate it? That this particular block of code I'm writing is going to be a class. Please, you can unmute and talk. Hello, my people.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, please speak.
You use the dot and the class name.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So if you want to write a class, use the dot and the class name. Then inside your inside your code, sorry, you do class, then you specify the name of the class that you want. So that is it. Then for IDs, you use what you call the hash sign to indicate that this is an ID. But IDs can be applied to only one element within your container. So you can have a lot of other elements, but you can only apply an ID to a single element within the HTML document. Okay, so let's move on. The next one I want us to talk about is layout. Now, as you can see, the page that we are looking at, the W3 school that we are looking at, has a kind of structure. It has been structured in a way that looks appealing. So as you can see on top here is what you call header. So mostly you put all your heading, whatever you want to, all your navigation buttons, all of them will be on top. The side over here is what you call sidebar. Then the middle is where your content goes. So mostly this is how you structure your HTML pages. You can have you can put the sidebar that is here at the right side. It's up to you. That's anyhow you lay out your page is fine. Then also pages have what you call footer. the bottom over here is footer. So that is where you mostly specify the copyright and those things. So on top is header, sidebar, the content, and footer. So basically, that is how you specify your HTML. So the header, the nav. So that's the navigation bar. This one over here. Then the section or sidebar, then footer. So basically, that's how you design your HTML pages. Now, with HTML5, there's what you call semantics. So you can have a header tag as an element inside your HTML code, and it's perfect. So in that case, anyone that picks your code knows that, okay, everything that is inside the header is supposed to be the header. Then you can also have a nav tag. You can have a section, an article, a footer. So all these things can be used on the page to make your page look better. So as I said, HTML has all these semantics that you can use within your code. Article, so that gives an impression that you're going to display an article for the user to see. A side, just like the sidebar that I showed you, the nav bar, the footer, and so on. So these are how you lay out a page. So mostly a page will have a header, the nav bar, a sidebar, then a section. Okay, so that is how. But mostly we use you can use a div to kind of lay out your pages, then apply styling. So you can have a div with the class header. You can have a div with a class called footer. So all this one you can use them to structure your page nicely. Previously, what was used to lay out pages is what tables. Now that one wasn't that responsive enough, because let's say when you have a smaller phone, then the page becomes loose bad. So the WW3 consortium brought what you call these semantics, divs, span, and those things to help you lay out your pages. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into today's class, that is forms. Now, as front-end developers, mostly what we'll be doing most is collecting input from the user, then sending it to the backend for the backend to process it and send it back to you. So mostly that is what we are going to do. Now, what do you use to do that? We use what you call the form or the form tag. The form tag helps you to achieve this. So this is basically how the form tag works. So form.html. So first of all, you have the form tag. Oops. Then you have a set of input inside. So the main or the parent is form. That's very important. You have to start with that one. Then you lay out your input into it. Now, input are just a way of a structure or data, a container that you can use to take data from the user. So the first one that you are going to use more is the input tag. Then the type is just test. So you're telling the person that you're just taking tests from it. So when I save this, then I go to the form tag. As you can see, I have a form that can input anything inside. So basically, that is how HTML forms are. You have a form tag, then you can put a bunch of input into it. So what you see there is what you call input. So it can be text. That is when you want to receive text input from the user, then use the input, then specify text. We look at a lot of types. Then the next one is radio. So if you want to, the user you want to have a list of items that the user can select from, you can use what you call radio or radio button. So this is how radio button looks like. So this is just input. Let's do it chronological order. Let me take the first one, then I'll explain it better. I want to take my time, then explain it better. So see, then you have a feeling of what you have. So you have first name and last name. Now let's go to the code that gave us that. So you know what forms are. The new thing that I'm introducing is I wanted to increase my so that I can see what I'm presenting. Okay, so the new thing that you're seeing now is what you call the label. So the label kind of tells the user what your input is expecting. Okay, so label, there you put in what you want to show the user, and that's it. But look at, there's a special key word here, for. Now the for has to match with the name on the input. So as you can see, have this input tag, the type is test, ID is F name. So the for has to match an ID on an input. Okay, so that means that this label is for this input. Okay, and every input should have a name. So the name that you're giving to this input is F name. The same thing applies to the second one, the last name. You have a label, then it's for this particular L name, but you are calling it last name. Okay, the BR, you already know what BR is. Because labels are inline element, the BR will force the next input to go on the next line. So that is it. So you have first name and last name. So this is how you do input. If you want to receive input from the keyboard, that's what you do. Now the next on our list, so I've explained what labels are. The next on our list is radio button. Now radio button are just a way of letting a user select at least one item from the list of options that we have for that particular user. Okay, so labels, you already know what label are. Now pay attention to this one. The type has changed from text to radio. So that is radio. So excuse me, this is how radio buttons are. This special kind of circles, that is what we call radio button. Now, you already know what the label is. The label for has to have an ID that matches with what you are going to do. So this one doesn't even make sense. This shouldn't be there. So let's say you can have, let's say, first name, then you have another input, first name. Then the next one is a type radio button. So the radio button has a name. Look at it. Favorite language. All the input has the same name. That's the difference between input type radio and input type text. So for the text, the first name has a different name from the last name. But for the radio button, they all have the same name. What that means is, at the end of the day, all these three inputs, we are only interested in one of them. You have to select only one. Okay. So if you want to have an option where the user selects one element, you use what you call radio button. So HTML, the ID HTML, this one goes for this label, go for the ID is HTML, the value is HTML. So if you look at it, if I select this one, that means I've selected HTML. When I select this one, automatically it unchecks this one and set this one, and that's it. So you can pick only one at a time. So that is what you call radio or radio buttons for CSS in HTML. Yeah, so basically that is radio button. We are going to move on to checkboxes. Okay, so let's go for the next one. Now, you use checkboxes when you want the user to select 0 or more. So if you want the user to have the option of selecting 1 or more, then you go with what you call checkboxes. If you want the user to select at least only one item, then use the input type should be radio. Okay, so let me copy this. But look at one fun thing. For the radio button, all of them, they had the same name, but with the checkbox, input type checkbox, they all have different names. So the first one is vehicle 1, the second one is vehicle 2, the third one is vehicle 3. So at any point in time, you can have one or more of these ones and you are fine. But with the radio button, we only deal with only one element. So let me do an example. Go to our page. Let me add a bit of BR so that okay, so this is our checkbox. So I can check as much as I want. Okay. But with the radio button, I could only check only one. But with the checkbox, you can check as many as you want. So if you want to do checkbox, use input type checkbox. Then give it a label. Don't forget the name and the value. Okay. Okay, so that is checkbox. Now the next input that you're going to look at is input type submit. Now submit is a way of telling the browser, the HTML page or whatever to submit whatever you've done to the backend for the backend to process. So how do you do that? Let me copy this. I don't want to clean what you already have. So call it form 2, the HTML. Then paste it. 2025. Put our code inside. Format it nicely. That's it. So look, pay attention to the form. Now the form is having what you call an action. Then as you can see, there's there is an URL action page.php. And what that means is, don't forget that we are talking about input type. The type has changed from checkbox, test, and radio to submit. If you do input type submit, you're going to get a button. Now this is a special button because it's going to force, when you click on it, it's going to submit all the data that you added to submit it to the URL that you specify inside your action. Okay, so let's run it and see what you have. So that's going to be form 2. So when you did input type submit, we have a button that you can click on. I'm not going to click on it because if I click on it, it's going to try to submit to action page, which we don't have. Okay, so in order to not to have, so if you want to submit to a server, that is where you put the link or the actual page that you want to submit to inside the action. Now look at something. We didn't type anything inside, but we automatically had values inside our input boxes. Okay, that is what you call default value. So if you want to automatically put a value inside your input tag, inside where your value is, just put whatever you want to do, value that you want it to be there inside the value attribute, and automatically your HTML will have this data. Please give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. So I was talking about default value. If you want your input to have a default value, what you do is inside the value tag, you just have to put whatever you want there. So if I put Stella there, automatically the input is going to have Stella. So that is what you call default values. But we are talking about input type submit. If you do input type and submit, automatically you are going to get a button. The value is what will be on the test. So if I put OK, the button is going to have OK on it. Whatever name that you want to put on the button will be is where you put you have to assign it to the value attribute of the input type submit. Okay, so submit results. And our button name change to submit results. So this is submit input type submit. You have another one. I think I've explained the names also. Okay, so let's look at our first exercise. In this form, add an input field with the type button and value. Okay, so someone should help me. What should I type? Please unmute and talk. Hello, my people.
Hello.
Yes, please help me.
I think the input and type submit
Input type.
and submit.
The type should be button.
Okay, type button. The value is okay.
Perfect. Let's submit and see if you are correct. Okay, you are correct. So fantastic. So that is input type. So now let's take a deep dive into the form attribute. So the first one that I've talked about is the action. So action specify or determines where you are sending the input. Okay. Like whatever the user has typed, where are you sending it to? The action will determine. So you tell the browser, okay, I'm sending it to the action page. So automatically it will just submit everything that the user has typed into this particular page and go and process it. So that is where the backend comes in. So that is where the other class they will learn how when you submit data to them, they will save it into the database and this. And we are interested in collecting the data from the user, then submitting it to server. However, the server handles it, that is not the job of the front-end developer. Now, there's another input, another attribute on the form element called target. So if you put underscore blank inside the target, what it's going to do is that the response is going to display in a new window or a new tab. So if you put target underscore blank, it's going to open another tag and submit your data over there. The serve, the top, and those things. These are not important. What is important, very, very important, is the action and the method. Now, let me explain this one. We are going to use this method extensively in our React class. Now, HTTP has a way of communicating with other backend or other bits of the internet. So let's say if your code or your project or your front end want to speak with a backend, it has to use a particular language that the backend understand. So the method that determines what you are sending or how the communication is going to be. So the common ones that you should know are the HTTP verbs. The common ones are get, post, delete, and put or update, put or patch. So the HTTP verbs that we are going to use mostly is the get. I'll explain what a get is. They have post, then delete, then either put or patch. Any of them is fine. So if you use get is mostly used to send data to the server using the URL. So what it does is when you submit a data that is being marked as get, let's do example from here so that you understand. So in that case, you submit the data, then you see the data that is being sent inside the URL. So let me hit. If you when you look at this one, the method has been marked as get, and the target is blank. So that means I'm going to open in a new tab. So when I hit it, now look at it. What we submitted the F name, that was John, and the last name was Doe. Now this data has been appended to the URL. So in this case, this is what we call a get request. So get request submit data using the URL. Now there's a limitation when it comes to this because the browser has a limited number of data that you want to like that it allows the URL to take. But the most important thing is security. So that means that if you had another input, okay, call password. So let's say our first name or last name was password. Then let's say this is our secret password that nobody should know. Now, when I hit this one, as you can see, our password is being sent inside the URL. Anyone that sees that have access to the URL will see what we are sending to the server. So mostly we don't use get when there's sensitive data that is involved. So let's say if you want to go and fetch a particular item for the database, you can just use the ID, then you go for it. But if you want to submit sensitive data, that is where you have to use HTTP verb post. So post kind of hide the data and doesn't display it inside the URL. So it hide it within the HTML body, then submit it. So now the HTTP verb is post. So now let's say my name, then I hit it. Now you see there's no data inside the URL, but our backend receive our input and is showing us what it received. So if you want to send a sensitive data to the browser, to the server, you have to use HTTP post. Now the rest I've talked about, the delete is used when you want to delete something from the server. You use the HTTP verb delete. Then the put and the patch is for update. If you want to send update to the server, you either use put or patch. So just like get and post, you can either use put or patch, and that is for update. We take a deeper dive into those ones when you start with HTML. Now let's take a critical look at the HTML form elements. These are the most important elements when you want to do forms. You have the input, you've already seen it. You have the label, you've already seen it. Then the one that you've not seen is the select. Select is just like a drop down. I'll show you an example. A test area is where, let's say, if you have a lot of data that you want to take, like a longer test that you want to take from the user, then you can use test area. Then you have button. Button is like if you want the user to be clicking on those things. All these ones are free sets. Most you don't use them, so I'm not going to waste my time on it. So the top ones are where I think our concern should be. Now, you've already seen the input type test. Now, input type test automatically limited to a shorter. I think the length is 12 or something. That is very short. You are limited in the number of tests that you want to type. You can increase the weight using CSS, but automatically, if you do input type test, the HTML is going to give you a container to enter whatever you want inside. Let me close all this one so that you can have a lot of examples. The next one, labels, I've already talked about them. The next bigger one is select, and I'm going to take a little bit time to explain it. Now, select is just like a drop down. If you want to select something from a list of items, so the element is called select. The ID you already know. The name, that is the name that when you click, the data that will be sent will be associated with this particular value. Now, there are a special task that goes with select that is called option. So if you want to show the options that the drop down should have, you use what you call option tag. Then the value is what you send to the server. Then within the option tag, whatever you put within the option tag is what the user will see. So the sub, the fiat, and the OD. So when I click on this one, these are the options that are being set out over here. So if I can add another option. So let me call it BMW. Close the option. As you already know, an option should have what you call value. I'm going to call it BMW with small letters. So just to differentiate between these two. So let me run it. And I come here, voila, I have BMW. Okay, so this is how you do select. If you want to have a drop down where the user can select from, use the select. That one doesn't use input tag select, it just selects. Please take note of the syntax select, then you have options within them. Okay, so that is select for you. The next one on our list, I've talked about options, select. So if you want to select multiple items, you can add the word multiple, and automatically your select will behave as will allow you to select multiple items. So let me take the size. The size will tell you how much select show. I don't like it. It makes it ugly. So I'm going to hide it, run it. Okay, so as you can see, our select has a special attribute called multiple. Now when you click on it, now you can select multiple items. This is not working. Oh, okay, so you have to use the control. So if you press on the control, you can select multiple items. So if you add a multiple attribute over here, it changes the structure of how your select item becomes. So in that case, you can select multiple items on that list. Okay, so the next one is test area. So the test area is used for multi-line. So as you can see, as we did for the first one, the input type, you were limited with the number of characters that you could type. It was too small. But if you look at the test area, so you use test area, the name is message. Automatically, we are putting data inside. Let me take it off, run it. So it becomes bigger, and you can type anything inside, and you can go to next line. Unlike the input type test that you only have that one line that you can type. So that is test area. Now what controls is the row and the core. So the rows determines how many lines of code that you can have. So let's say if I have 5, now I can have only 5 lines at a time. I can go more, but by default, it's going to give me 5. The column is the number of characters that can be assigned on the horizontal axis. So that is test area for you. So you use the test area. It's a opening and closing tags. Then whatever you enter, you can get it from the server. So that is test area for you. The next on our list, okay, so test area.